Welcome to Women Empowered Live, where we gather weekly to discuss principles of self-defense and how they can be applied to any of life's challenges.
And how we can collectively contribute to making this world a safer place.
Let's do this. So this week, we actually had another topic in mind, and then
Switch.
we had to do a switch because we were just called and moved towards speaking about this. So a little bit of background about me. Some people know me from my wrestling background. Others don't know me from my wrestling background at all and have kind of followed us through Women Empowered and through Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. But, you know, I was with the WWE for 5 years and had a really, life-changing experience through wrestling. I traveled the world. I got to perform in front of just hundreds of thousands, millions of people, really. And it was a life-changing experience. Like, I guess that's the only way I could say it. Life-changing, and it brought me so much. However, throughout my career, and I would say especially after my career, you're able to kind of look back and recognize some of the things that were kind of underlying, especially in the beginning when I started in wrestling. And a little history for those of you who aren't really familiar. When I came in to the wrestling world, it was in 2008. And this shift had happened, which was that they went to PG programming. Okay, so before I had started, there was a lot of the women who were super talented and incredible talents and amazing wrestlers. But a lot of the women's segments all focused around these like hyper sexualized, images of women. And it was like all kind of bra and panty matches, not all, but a lot of them. And once we shifted to PG, it was this interesting thing where it's kind of like if we couldn't be hypersexualized, then we weren't valuable. And so they basically kind of like deleted us from the programming. We'd show up and like wave and do like a 4-minute match and then leave. And it kind of felt that way. And, again, now when you look at, especially, both WWE and wrestling, it has come so far, and it's really amazing to see that progress that has happened. But recently, within the last week or so, there has been another movement that was initiated, piggybacking off of many other movements in the past, one of those being the Me Too movement. But this one is #speaking out, and it is a lot of women and men in the wrestling world who are speaking out about abuse of power, who are speaking out about sexual abuse, about sexual assault, sexual harassment within the wrestling industry. And it has rocked the wrestling world, and it is something that many people who are in this world are watching very closely. And I think I just couldn't not speak about this, because every time these things come to light, I think there's a few things that happen, right? Number one is we all are emotionally charged for many different reasons. But you're exposed to, like, for me, it kind of it brought me back to the world that I was in, and it kind of made me look at that a little bit differently, right? But I also think that we can see, like, what we're seeing in the wrestling world, we often see in many other industries.
Yeah,
right?
I think it's really important to see that what she's explained is a mirror image in different realms. For me, it was the entertainment industry, but also I was a computer science major in college, one of the very few women in any sort of engineering industry. And in academia as a whole, we also recognize that there are big disparities of genders in different areas that might have power and abilities in hierarchies of different ways, whether you are a high legal or corporate climber to see, oh wow, everybody in power is predominantly male, and they can use their power to do things that are inappropriate or to leverage behavior with me because they want something. So this whole industry can be mirrored, this whole ideology can be mirrored in different industries and is mirrored in different industries. And it's really important that we want to talk about why people don't speak out, why speaking out can be very difficult, why it's okay if you don't want to speak out, and the fact that it affects a spectrum of human beings in different ways. So we don't want to also exclude the idea that for this conversation, we're going to talk about men and women. We're going to use these terms, but we are understanding that there is an entire spectrum of gender identification that you might be on. And so when we say this, we are not excluding you. We're doing this for the simplification of our communication. And know that we recognize that this hierarchy and abuse of power and sexual misconduct does not exclude you, and in fact probably includes everyone on this spectrum.
Right, and sometimes we make generalizations, and when we say men and women in these contexts, and that is really because statistically, the majority of these perpetrators are men. And so when we reference this is not to say that women can't be perpetrators of this, or that women are excluded from this, and also or that men can't also be survivors or targets or victims of this type of sexual misconduct. So, but sometimes those generalizations are made. Yeah, I think it's like I was just. I don't know. I was really emotionally moved by a lot of these statements that were made. Because again, you go, I remember being that age. A lot of them were younger women. Mm-hmm. And I remember being that age. And I remember all of the challenges of identifying what is appropriate and what is not. And that's like what's so beautiful about these brave men and women who are speaking out, is that they are reminding us of what is acceptable and what is not, and what is abuse and what is not. And I think it's easy to forget those lines, right? But I will say that it has also been emotionally charged for me, because watching these brave women speak out, and watching the comments that come in about them speaking out. There's many that are in support, but then there are many who are basically perpetuating the exact reasons why people don't continue to speak out. So we wanted to touch on those. We wanted to address, the reasons why there's so many barriers to speaking your truth, and what those look like, and why it's not as simple as, why didn't you just say something, or why didn't you just call the police, or why didn't you say something back then? And we wanted to explore those in depth, and then figure out what is the foundation that's allowing those barriers to exist on, right? So that's what we're going to get into
and then
today.
What we can do to change it.
Yes.
But we'll get to that.
We will. Yeah, so starting with, what these barriers are, why people don't speak out. And I think, potentially at the top of that list is shame. And it is the potential belief that they were a contributor to the incident, or that perhaps maybe in some way they deserved it based on anything that they had done or done up until that point. And it's a huge recognition to basically say that shame is a huge reason why people don't. And just because someone feels shame does not mean that shame was warranted, right? And that's what we need to make very clear to people.
And it's not just the self-shame, it's what you feel from others. Like, there is a public shame also from having done that having done to you. You're like, well, I've been violated. Now I feel shame for myself, but I also feel like others will look at me with shame that this happened. And then from shame, we go to blame. We get blamed a lot. Sometimes we blame ourselves. We get blamed by others, by what we're wearing. You put yourself in the position. Well, you went into his office after hours. All these little things that are subtle blame tactics, which exacerbate the shame.
Right. And we're going to get so far into why those things are dangerous, and why those assumptions and why that blame is so dangerous when it comes to this, and why it perpetuates this continual existence of these types of issues. But that is at the top of the list, and it's
shame.
It is, and we all have it for everything in the world, right? But that is one of the top reasons. The other is fear, is actual fear, and there are so many things that people can be fearful of when speaking out. One of those might be retaliation, fear of retaliation. So if you speak out against your abuser, especially if they are in a place of power or have any sort of notoriety, there is this fear that there will be retaliation from this person or from their peer group or their supporters. And that is a very justified and understandable fear.
Yeah, or I just won't be believed. No one's going to even believe what I said, because either the story is so outrageous, or the situation doesn't really make sense, or that person's reputation. He's such a good person. How could he would never do that to you? Why would someone do that to you? You're a good person, and all the reasons why someone won't believe you, won't be believed. It's a huge reason why women or people who have had this happen to them don't speak out.
Yeah, and then the other fear I would say is, especially when it's in the context of their job, right? Something that happens within their career, they actually have fear that it will affect their career, that they won't get hired, or that they'll get fired, or that they'll be kind of rejected by their colleagues, and so that it will affect their their future and their career. That's another fear.
And their career is tied to their financial safety. And when it comes to a lot of our primal abilities, our ability to be financially safe and therefore put food in our mouth and protect our families and children, that career safety is a bigger bubble than just, the job that I have. It's, my ability to pay rent and therefore have a roof over my head. So the career factor is deeper and insidious, but that goes and segues directly into our other relationships. Because even though the career relationships we build are one level, it could also affect our families. I might have to protect my children, so I don't want to get out of this situation or speak out against an attacker who might be someone I know well, because I need to protect my children or my family members. And protecting those relationships are really important for people.
And or the abuser might be within your circle of friends. So there is this fear that then you will then feel distance from your supposed friends or people in your circles and your support group, that they may turn against you and support the abuser in this case. And so that's another, when it comes to relationships and the fears of how that will affect your relationship dynamic, this is something that actually can happen.
Yeah, and people also go into just the fear of embarrassment. Speaking out can lead to a lot of backlash or embarrassing feelings based on the fact that your entire private situation is now put out there. Something that happens to you is now exposed either publicly in your circle of friends or extended on a more global public scale. And this can really exacerbate the feeling of embarrassment for a lot of people. And the fact that something happened to you can be embarrassing, and that's okay. It can feel that way. And that is why a lot of people don't speak out on this.
Yeah, and then the last kind of fear we'll address here is the fear of legal ramifications. So that is also something that people are considering when they are thinking about speaking out, especially if it's against somebody who has kind of a lot of legal power behind them. There is a concern that there might be some sort of legal ramifications that they themselves don't feel prepared for, and they're just not really looking even to go down that route. And so it puts a huge barrier in terms of them feeling like they can speak their truth.
So now that we're past all the general fears of the idea of why people don't speak out, let's really look at some of the primal psychological hesitations as to why we might say something about something that happened to us. And one of the main ones is straight up denial. Now, this is a psychological defense mechanism that your body has to do to almost protect yourself into either emotional overwhelm or disruption. And denial is a really beautiful coping tool that a lot of us create or manifest when we're young children to kind of get through overwhelming situations. And if you've carried that tool into adulthood, denial can literally protect you from the feeling of all that happened during either an attack or even a subtle, slight against you in a sexually inappropriate situation. And denial is a heavy tool that our subconscious uses to keep us safe. So while it might be confusing, while someone's like, no, that really happened to you, what you're describing to me sounds like sexual assault, they might be like, no, that couldn't happen. A, because they want to protect themselves, both emotionally and psychologically. And B, because they're just trying to survive in a different way that might not be needed at this point in their life, but it's what they did to be able to get through it. So it's difficult to talk to someone sometimes or to yourself and realize, I am denying that this even happened. Why? To give yourself or this person in front of you some grace that denial is a heavy tool and an important one for us. But it's also like that gentle, okay, maybe I don't need denial right now. Maybe I can face this. But that is a huge preventative tool to speaking out. Okay, my gosh. Hold on. Can you?
Interesting.
Hold on, guys. Let's see.
I had it on. There we go.
Okay, I think we're back.
Still live.
Great.
Hopefully. I got a phone call. I had it on Do Not Disturb. I don't know what's happening.
I don't know either.
Here we go. Continuing. Denial. Big psychological tool. Beautiful and beneficial. But we can also understand why people do that, why they speak out. When they don't speak out.
And kind of piggybacking off of denial, one side of it might be denial, but the other is that somebody may actually not be able to identify it as abuse.
Yeah.
And those kind of work together in some ways, but I think that there's actually, and this we'll touch more on this later, but this goes back to the normalization of these behaviors. And so when these behaviors are normalized, or when the blame is placed on, consistently on the victim or on the survivors of these assaults or crimes, then it is actually really difficult to label it as abuse. And you might say, no, I contributed to that, or I was a part of that, or that was not, and that is another reason why it's so important for these people, these brave men and women, to continue to speak out, because then you go, oh my gosh, what they're describing is actually what I've experienced, and they're reminding us that this is actually abuse, or this is assault, and having that that identification. Now, it's important to note, because I think some people might say, well, if you were in denial of it, or if you didn't even identify it as abuse, then it couldn't be harmful to you, right? And that's an important distinction to make. So just because you're not labeling it yourself as abuse, and you may not have said, oh, I was sexually abused, or that was sexual assault, it can still be just as damaging, if not more so, than those who actually can or are able to identify it as such, or who are able to kind of face that. Yeah. And that's an important distinction to make, because I think that's what a lot of people say, well, if you didn't know that it was even assault, it couldn't have been that bad. And actually, surprisingly, sometimes it is, again, so bad that defensive mechanism steps in, and you go, oh, I'm not even ready to face this for what it is. So I'm just going to package this up, put it in the back, and deal with it later.
And I'm glad you touched on that, because we can share this on Instagram later, but there is a beautiful feed on Twitter that talks about a lot of the district attorneys and judges' commentary that is completely invalidating for a person's experience, because they'll say things like, well, if you're having this sort of reaction to it, then it couldn't have been that bad. But that's because they're really not understanding the brain's protective behaviors on how we, in order to literally survive traumatic situations, can shut down, compartmentalize, and completely deny something that was really happening. And it's really important that we are very educated ourselves, and therefore educating our children, both male and female, or any gender that we decide to affiliate with, on what our bodies are doing psychologically to protect ourselves, so that we can identify, even though someone doesn't exhibit behaviors that we portray on television or in our fears of what an abused or attacked person is. And if we can identify those early on and still say, hey, they're not exhibiting those, post-attack behaviors, but they've still been attacked or abused in these ways.
And more just talking more about why that can be so damaging is, imagine if you actually experience abuse and are not able to identify it as such. Think about how you go about your other interactions in your everyday life, and how it actually can kind of prime somebody for future abuse. And that's actually another one of the reasons why people may not speak out, is because perhaps they've actually experienced a past trauma that has been normalized to them.
Yeah.
And so they go, oh, this is just the way things work. This is the way
This is what love feels like.
This is what love feels like. This is what I asked for when I came into this industry, or this is part of just coming up in this world. They may actually, that may be normalized for them.
Yeah.
And that does not mean that it's healthy, and that does not make it okay. These are things that have been normalized based on either past traumas or things that they have witnessed.
And I'm glad you said that, because that actually bridges into another reason why people don't speak out, is that's because they want to protect their abuser. Because some of these belief systems that what's happening is not only normal, but it's what the industry offers. It's what, my significant other has, how they should treat me, or I deserved it. They end up protecting their abuser, because they're like, no, they're a good they're just doing this thing. It's my fault. I asked for it. I was wearing the outfit. I went into the office. I begged for this position, or climbing into the next ladder ring that meant that he was forced to do that for me. So protecting the abuser is another one of our subtle ways that people don't want to speak out, because they think that either reputationally, like, oh, a lot of it, I'm going to go into a really possibly sensitive topic of like a pastor at a church. I grew up when the person who was in a very lead position in our church, that person was abusing a 13-year-old child. And that was a difficult thing to say, because he was like, but he's so good to so many of the other kids. He was so great. So people wanted to actually protect him, even though he had abused a child 20 years younger than him. And it was confusing. Even the 13-year-old wanted to protect him.
Right, and we actually see that especially with a lot of when it's child abuse cases, right, and child sexual abuse, is that there is this completely sick relationship that's built that is not real intimacy, but the child perceives as an actual intimate relationship. We saw this with, anyone who watched the Michael Jackson documentaries, and you will see this over and over again with these, especially these kind of serial either predators that have, basically been predatory towards multiple either young women or boys. But they are masters at creating this relationship where they say, no, I'm good, I'm a good person for you, or I'm here for you, or I love you. And that person might actually believe that their abuser loves them, or that their abuser is a good person. And this is really hard for people to understand who haven't seen that and who just think it's like a very black and white, bad or good or bad thing. And again, they might say, well, if they didn't have a bad relationship with them, then, it couldn't have been that damaging. And just think about that. And again, you almost have to think about the extremes when you address why that can't be. When you look at a 13-year-old boy or girl who's having a relationship with somebody older than them, even if you say, well, they don't, they still love this person, or they still see them as a good person, or they want to protect them, that does not make it okay and healthy. And what that's setting them up for in the future is it's extremely harmful to them.
Yeah. And this distorts also the image of the abuser in the sense that they could be a perceived good person in that they do good in so many other areas of the world, and they themselves could also have a sick or unhealthy view of what a relationship is, and that might be a power position with a younger person and having that inappropriate behavior. So that is, again, why a lot of people don't speak out, is when they want to protect this abuser, and that's a very difficult place to be.
Yeah, very difficult. And then I think the other reason why many people don't is just the belief that nothing will be done, or nothing, that they could speak out and it's kind of like, oh, the system protects them, or they'll be protected because of X, Y, or Z, and they feel like, why should I go through all of this if nothing's even going to happen? And that's, again, that's a justified feeling for many, when especially history has kind of shown many, many times that even when multiple tens of women or allegations that come out against somebody, and they just get swept under the rug. So you go, why would I do that to myself and put myself in this position for all this backlash if nothing's even going to happen? And that is part of what we need to change, and so we're going to address that later.
Yeah, and that idea also stems into the amount of time that's passed. Like, well, it's been a year or two since this happened,
or 10 years.
10 years. No, my memory is like been trying to block it out for years. So I don't want to revisit it. I don't want to rehash it out. I don't even want to bring up those feelings again, to have to tell my story again. And again, it comes back to like self-preservation. In order for me to survive, I don't want to talk about it. Too much time has passed. I don't want to say anything about it.
It's re-traumatization, and that's another actual reason is even somebody and we were talking about this before about why we feel like because sometimes people do speak up, but it's 10 years later or further, right? And why is that it can take so long? So we're talking about why women don't, but why also is it that it can take an extended period of time for someone to either recognize it, to identify it, to find the courage to actually speak up on it? And you were kind of speaking on that the other day, right? About like the confidence.
Like part of what I realized, and a lot of my friends who have taken a good amount of time to go from, let's just say, the time that the event happens to even telling, let's say, first a friend, and then from a friend, a group of people, to maybe even an official of some sort that can either support and or help you get justice. Part of that time period is the building of confidence and or healing. Both can be intertwined, the same, or completely separate. And why it might take someone so long to come out about this is because they haven't even built the confidence yet to face themselves or to face others, that this has both happened and they're willing to share it. And time can be a confidence builder, because what do? They talk to other people and hear their stories first before they've shared their own. And they're like, oh my God, that happened to her and her and to her. Okay, there's nothing wrong with me. What happened, I can heal through. They're given some normalization and almost comfort in their ability to sort of be able to speak and like, oh, I didn't judge her and she's amazing still, so I can say this to people. So once that confidence is being built over time, then, and again, it doesn't always mean that they'll come out. They might just build the confidence and be like, it'll never happen to me again, ever, period. Or they'll build the confidence and say, I need to tell someone. Or they'll build even more confidence or a different kind of confidence and say, I won't let this person do this to anyone else. I must go public. I must go big, even at the expense of all my comfort and all the things that we will get into in a minute as to the barriers.
And I think along those lines as well, a lot of these incidents happen to women in their younger, like either teenage years or early 20s.
Yeah.
And not to say that it can't happen later in life, and it doesn't. But I would say, statistically, a majority of those do happen in that age range. And so I would say that as a woman coming into like your 30s, so maybe 10 years after an incident like this, it's almost like you're able to kind of see it from this other perspective. You might be far removed from that situation you were in.
Sure.
And it's similar to like if somebody explained it to, you or I, and we go, oh my gosh, that's abuse. Like that was abuse. You are almost coming into your own woman or your own person or a separate person and you can look back from a different perspective and go, that was not okay. I am now removed from that situation. I can see clear as day that was not okay.
Yeah.
And sometimes it just takes a lot of time for us to be able to identify that. And that's okay too. And that is part of why we grow and why we learn and, part of becoming a woman or part of growing up for all of us.
Yeah, so now it's important to really get into what keeps us from breaking these barriers, from all the things that keep us from wanting to speak out. And let me be very clear. It's okay if you never want to speak out. It's okay if that doesn't feel right for you, if there's something inside of you that still wants to deal with or keep private or just hold to yourself like this happened to me. No one else really needs to know about this. That is your protective, beautiful space.
And everyone heals differently, right? So there will be some people where, again, like for all the reasons we just discussed, this can be re-traumatizing and it can be an extremely difficult thing. And the reason why we're highlighting this is not to, again, make people in fear of speaking out, but it's to remind people how brave someone has to be for all of those reasons, right? To be able to speak out and what kind of bravery that takes to basically say, recognizing that all of these fears exist, all of these things could potentially happen. I need to release my truth and I need to do that. And we're going to talk about in a bit the benefits of doing that and what happens once you are able to speak your truth and you're able to unleash. But we do recognize that it is not everyone is going to be at a place in their life where they can. And that is also, not to blame. We completely understand. Everyone understands based on all these reasons why it's so challenging.
Yes.
But we do want to kind of uncover what's the foundation to this? Like, what is the foundation to these barriers that is keeping those in place and that is making it, continuously makes it difficult for people to speak?
I have one. The normalization of a rape culture.
Let's talk about it.
It is an insidious idea that is perpetuated even on television and film. In fact, my friend Lauren Gottlieb, who is, has a heavy play in the Indian world, in India, she was a beautiful actress, dancer that was there, and she explained to me how and even Alia right here has shown me beautiful insight into the Indian culture, that every movie is about this man who chases a woman, and the woman is demure and, won't give in. So what does that mean? The man must be persistent and keep going forward. And even if she says no, she wants it. Trust me. So when we understand that this picture that we paint for men is go for a woman at all costs. And when she says no, she really means yes. And she wants more. She wants you to be a man and grow up and fight up. It's confusing. And bless these men's heart, because they are a part of the indoctrination into this ideology that we are these objects to be won, these objects to be conquered and to own. Even the entire history of how women and men would come together and get married is a state of ownership. The idea of Mr., Mrs., Ms., and Miss is a social status that we give to women to show whether they have been owned, disowned, widowed, or not. And this comes from, in the idea of rape culture, that the man can do what they want with a woman.
That he owns her.
That he can do whatever he wants. Like you buy her, she's your wife, do what you put a ring on it, she's got your name, her name doesn't matter anymore, her entire existence is deleted, she comes to you, she raises your kids, and what do you want to do with her? Rape culture can happen because I own it. And that doesn't just mean your wife. That means any woman who walks down the street right here, I want her, I can have her. Why? Because women want men. They want to feel good. And there's confusion there. You know what women want? Sovereignty over our own bodies. the ability to make our own amount of endless financial stability in our world. Maybe the idea that we can have dreams and sisterhood without feeling danger as we walk into a local brunch spot.
Women want to feel safe.
Safe, loved, and secure.
Supported,
That's it.
Respected.
That's it. So that's
simple.
the opposite of rape culture. And if you are a person who has heard of another man, another even female, who has perpetuated rape culture, then we ask politely that you sit with yourself for a minute and go, how do I contribute to rape culture?
And this is a super important question, right? Because even this is not just men who are doing this. Like we, as women, we might subscribe to some of these and go, oh my gosh, I've been shown this from a very young age, that this is what is expected and this is what the norm, and it comes back to how we normalize this and how it's always been the way. And at what point do we go, you know what? This is not the way. This should not be the way. And it's not about disregarding tradition. It's not about disregarding history. It's about recognizing when you go, where did this come from? And how is this foundation on basically the ability to try to oppress others or keep someone's power? And at what point should we question that and recognize that that doesn't need to be the case? And so we need to look at how it's just normalized in comedy and film and songs and all the media images that are coming in, and we may not be able to stop all of that, right? But you can at least watch that and go, I see how this is kind of furthering this along, and how it just normalizes this idea that basically this idea that boys will be boys, that boys have this inability to control themselves, right? That men have this inability to control their sexual urges. That is just simply not true.
And it's so dehumanizing even for the man. So
men are completely capable of doing this. It's just this idea of how it's been normalized, and it's just a matter of observing it, recognizing it, and recognizing how it can contribute. And this does come down to, again, to kind of like essentially patriarchy, and how some of these were systems of oppression that were created, and how really the biggest problem with all of this is the fact that there's protection for them kind of built into the system to protect men from being held accountable from these things. And that is another one of these underlying issues. And if you, there are tons of documentaries on so many of these powerful, figures who have done this. And you just go, wow, there's a whole system backing them up to allow them to contribute to this, Jeffrey Epstein being one of them. And if you have not yet watched that documentary, I warn you, it is, somewhat traumatizing. It is traumatizing for many, but it is an important recognition of how this is perpetuated and how the whole system can back somebody up to allow them to contribute and to continue these types of acts.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the biggest hints for ourselves to go, it's a system. Back who knows when, we started building culture, the culture turned into more government control. Even government has a say in how your marriage goes down, both for protection but also for control. And when we really understand the system of patriarchy and how it was built to really benefit the men because it was created by men for men, there are some ways that you can then question. Now let me just play devil's advocate for a little bit, because I know there's a lot of not just women but men who are like, but wait a minute, like these men are actually, they want to help us, they want to protect us, they want to do this. I know a lot of women who are like, I enjoy my role in this way. This is not to say that that can't still be your role as a wife who might be like, take care of me, I want to take your name, I want to take your ring, I want to, I'm okay with you providing for me in every way, and I'll raise the kids. This has nothing to do with roles you choose to be in. That's beautiful. You're making the conscious effort and decision to do this from sovereignty. It's when the power is exerted and abused over you and you have no say or control. And for those of you who are in positions of sovereignty and you're choosing it, you might go, well, who would do that? Believe it or not, a lot of women find themselves in a situation that they don't choose to be there, but because of their upbringing of trauma or misunderstanding of what love is, they find themselves in a very patriarchal relationship and or dynamic in their work environments, and they don't really even identify that this is happening. So again, one of the reasons that keeps us from breaking the barriers is the fact that patriarchy is alive, well, and really insidious in a lot of the institutions we work and live in.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you talk about sovereignty. Like let's think about it, right? So I actually, even people who might feel like I'm a sovereign being and I get to make my own choices. What we're not always thinking about is how, again, coming into a situation, there's kind of a set of rules or a set of messaging that's being put on that person in so many different ways that are actually influencing their sovereignty or their choices. So something that you might feel like was a choice may actually not be based on the amount of information that was, or the messaging that was being, forced down somebody's throat from an early age. So you might feel sovereign, but then you go, wait, am I actually sovereign? Or am I being influenced by these messages that tells me, oh, I have to do this in order to be that? And ultimately, we still have these fundamental needs and desires to be accepted and to be loved. And if you feel like I won't be accepted, or I won't be loved, or I won't be successful if I don't do X, Y, or Z, then we actually aren't fully sovereign in terms of being able to make those choices, because we have that underlying restrictions on what it is that we feel like we can or can't do.
And that's also because we've romanticized the idea. Ever since I was a little girl, I was given this beautiful idea that if you just find a man who will marry you and show you that you are enough to be a wife, and then he'll take care of you, provide for you, and then you will bear children for him, and you will have this white picket fence and a home in this linear progression of life, then you will have the token of American happiness. I did not even recognize how scripted it was, and then thrown into my consciousness, digested, and became my dream by pure brainwash of every rom-com that exists in the media. Every idea that's happening told me, depend on the man for your happiness, for your financial stability, for your social status in the world. And I literally have to choke on that sometimes and go, oh my gosh, why do I want this? Why do I want this? Is it because I was taught this at a young age? Or is it because I genuinely want to partner up with my spouse and find a life together? And that is why I am very proud that my husband and I have even redefined what husband and wife are, and we're exploring our intersectional independence and going, wait, what does that look like? How can you exist and I exist in pure sovereignty? And how can we deconstruct and de-brainwash the ideas of what we think we need to be, even for each other in society, what we carry, what we don't. And again, this is what is difficult for a lot of us to do when we have so deeply sat in a different aquatic system, to then now come out of the water and go, I was in a system. I was in a system, and now I can pull out of that at any given time.
Yeah, so that is a prompt for many of you to look at that, and it's a deep one. It's not. I'm sure there's a whole ways of supporting you going down a journey of recognizing what are choices that I have made, or what are things that have just been told to me that I just assumed this is the way things work, and this is the way this is what I have to feed into.
Yeah.
The other thing that I think is, we just kind of have to get into, because it is the underlying issue with why people don't speak out, which ultimately people speaking out is going to be what helps put an end, because it's going to create accountability, which is what we need, right? But how can someone be accountable? So when it comes down to accountability, right, that's ultimately what could potentially really make a huge step forward in progress.
Yeah.
Because if someone feels like I can't do that, because we would hope that they decide not to do that because they feel like it's the wrong thing. But let's assume that didn't apply to them. But maybe they'll go, I can't do that because I will be caught, I will be ousted, I will be, I will go to jail. At least having some recognition that there will be some accountability for their actions. And when we talk about accountability, what's the opposite of that? Blame, right? The opposite of accountability is blame. And that is where victim blaming happens and comes in.
I just think of when someone steals something. Sorry, 1 second. If you go into a store and someone steals something, they're like, well, you shouldn't have left it out there for all of us to just hold and touch. What are you talking about?
Right. Those flaming hot Cheetos, they just look so good. I just had to take them and steal them because...
We have social agreements that tell us, I'll put out things here and you will pay in exchange for the services. But that, for some reason, with us, it's like, you are a woman. I will ask your consent to see if you, in fact, do want to engage with me on a sexual level or an emotionally different level. But no, we start to blame them. Well, you put it out there. You engaged. Let's go into victim blaming. Sorry.
Yes.
You were starting, but I just had to get in.
I know. It's one of those that when, like, we can look at that and go, how does this make sense? But there are many people that this is, again, when the logic is founded in this belief that, well, this is normal.
Yep.
Right? And men can't control their sexual urges. So any woman who wears a certain thing, or who walks into a hotel room, or who walks into an office wearing this or that, or drank this or did that, is deserving or to blame for him in doing that. That is the foundation where you go, how can we ever hold anyone accountable when the person they are basically, targeting is the one that we continue to blame for this? So we will never establish accountability if we continue to this like victim blaming dialogue. And it is heartbreaking to see. And if you don't think that this is happening, it is. And we all may be somewhat responsible for having some of these thoughts, and it's important to check those and go, at what point when something happened, did I go, well, they shouldn't have been doing that, or they shouldn't, instead of really focusing on the person who should not be committing these vile crimes. Like, we have to reframe that. And when you, especially with the speaking out movement, watching the comments that came in through I was following on Twitter, but just watching the comments where people just go, well, you did this or you did that, or what did you expect? And it is heartbreaking and it is infuriating, because once again, we are now putting the blame and the responsibility into those. Now, here's what's interesting is, as we learn and as we grow, and as we, especially for us, and what we teach is self-defense, right? We teach people and women tools to help them identify these types of interactions as abuse, to help them, to give them tools to be able to fight against them, right? Or defend against them, both verbal tools and strategies, but also physical strategies, right? But at no point did we ever say it's your responsibility to do this. Like, you have to. Now, we recognize that because this, we cannot change the overnight. The goal is that we will change this, right? But we cannot change overnight the fact that these people will continue to have predatory behavior towards women, or towards young women, or even young boys. But what we can do is keep women informed about, hey, just so you know, when that happens, that is actually abuse, or that's actually sexual assault, and here are some tools you can use,
or some options,
right? But that should not be confused with the idea that they are obligated or that they are responsible for doing that. They should just have the right to be able to defend themselves and identify these behaviors.
So I think it's important you take a moment right now. Let's just breathe and ask yourself. And I love it. I love the fired upness, especially when we get there. But I think it's really important that we take a moment and ask ourselves, when someone has divulged some information to us that they have either been inappropriately approached, or boundary crossed, or straight up attacked, have I questioned their participation in it? Have I asked them if they asked for it? Have I doubted their truth at all? Have I told them that they deserved it, or that they could have done something different to have kept this from happening? If you, or anyone you know, falls under these guidelines of questioning, there's a chance that you might have been victim blaming. And what's so beautiful about this is, I don't want you to feel bad that this has happened or that you have done this. I want you to first recognize that it has happened, that it's possible that a good person can inadvertently victim blame and then go, wow, I can change my behavior and be an advocate for understanding someone's real experience, and then help them in a way that doesn't have to blame them. We by no means want to tell you that you are a bad person for victim blaming, because we also get the idea that sometimes we don't know the full scope of how things go down. And it goes deeper even into like slut shaming. Just because a woman did want to possibly have a connection with a man doesn't mean she deserved to be fully attacked and raped that evening. Maybe she was hoping it could go into a small relationship and build towards a trusted and safe sexual situation. So when you're out with some friends and you're like, well, you were asking for it, you were all over them all night. Let's be very clear. just because you want to actually have a relationship with a person, it does not mean you deserve to be taken advantage of, boundary pushed, or attacked sexually without your consent. So it's very important that we understand our contributing behavior and the contributing behavior of those around us by, again, inadvertently or overtly victim blaming. But the only way to know for victim blaming is to understand what that is and how we may contribute to that paradigm.
And until we stop victim blaming,
It won't
perpetrators will not be held accountable, ultimately. So I want to transition into I want to focus on the bravery of these women and men who are speaking out. And again, this is not just in the wrestling world, as of last week. There have been more and more people speaking their truths, again, in film, piggybacking off of the Me Too movement, which has actually been existing for many generations. But just this idea of people speaking out against abusers and the benefits to it. So I want to focus on the beauty of it is, because ultimately we want to encourage more people to do that and support them as they make that decision to do that
in a safe way.
In a safe way, exactly. So the benefits are, number one is just it's healing. And that if you are at the right place in your life and with the right support system in place, which we'll talk about how to acquire that, but it can be an extremely healing piece where it's like this weight that was on your shoulders is ultimately lifted off, and you go, this is no longer mine to carry. Here it is.
Yeah.
And you can just, being able to tell your truth. They say the truth shall set you free. And that is ultimately what is happening for many of these people who are speaking their truths right now.
Yeah, there's a therapy term called integration, and that's the idea that all parts of your lives have come together and you're feeling like you're living a full and truthful life because everything is kind of out in the open and very clear. And sometimes people feel what you could either call it conflicted or divided because they feel like there's a part of them that people don't know. And I'm not talking about know as in terms of public Instagram persona, but even your close family and friends might not know that something happened to you because you keep it secret. When she's talking about healing, it's the full integration that everything in your life has come out and people understand this about you, accept this about you, and love this about you. And we do know that for many, many, many people who speak out, they have found an entirely blanket of healing from recognizing that the people and the loved ones around them not only want to know this about them, but want to be there to support them and love them through this. And this can be an incredible form of healing for many people who have been survivors.
That's right. And that's actually what I was going to say, is just the level of support. So as much as there may be backlash, there also will be an outpouring of support from people who love you and who care about you. So finally getting support for something that you may have been carrying by yourself for so long, this is an opportunity to garner that to help you through this. I would say the other element is just finally a sense of community. So there is something about a group of either women or survivors in general who have all experienced similar things and traumas, who can then come together as a community and support each other. And there's something about going through a shared experience with people that just simply bonds them.
Yep.
And actually, if you watch the Jeffrey Epstein documentary, they spoke about that as well, that these women felt this kind of bond through this horrific tragedy and trauma that they all experienced, but they felt like no one else understands me. No one else can understand me except for somebody else who went through this. So there is this natural sense of community that is built. And that by you speaking out, you will kind of engage that community and find who that community is for you.
And that's one of the things we're really proud of in the Women Empowered program, is that we don't just come in, teach self-defense, and leave. We actually have a lot of talks about the multiple layers and depths that it is in healing from all these different levels of, I want to call it emotional, psychological, or physical disruption. A disruption to our peace, our ease, our ability to float through the world in a safe way. And coming here, we don't just want to say, here's a tool, get out. We cultivate a sisterhood of understanding. What do you need? I can't help you, but here's someone who can. We literally try to build an infrastructure, a web, if you will, so that whatever happens to any of us, including myself, I know the web will catch me. And that is part of when finding a community, it's not coming to someone and feeling like you can throw all your stuff on that one person and weighing one person down. It's taking what you can, allowing it to fill up, and then going, I'm at my limit, but you know what? I'm going to hand this off to the next person. And that's what community can build. So you don't have to feel like, the beauty of this when you speak out is that you will feel like this net that has you. And then they, as we have all learned and taught each other, can learn how to help you have yourself again. So speaking out really builds a resilience within yourself that doesn't necessarily depend on as many outwardly, relationships, which is a lot of why these attacks can happen is that these perpetrators can see sometimes like, oh, this person, they are going to need me for this reason. Then we learn to build resilience within ourselves and not expect the outside world to kind of help that.
That's right. And another benefit, and one of the reasons why we continue to encourage and just hold space for those who are ready to speak out, is that you are simultaneously validating the experiences of so many other survivors.
Yeah.
So by you speaking and identifying it, right, not only are you validating, you're also helping other people identify what happened to them in the past. And by speaking out on it, people go, oh my gosh, I'm not alone. So people recognize they're not alone in the experiences they have experienced, that there are other people, perhaps people they even look up to and admire and go, wow, if this can happen to this person, and this is like what they're going through, I feel a part of that and I feel connected to that. So it validates their experiences, right? And it also can help people identify it, where they go, wait, what happened to you is very similar to something that happened to me.
Yeah.
And if you're identifying this as abuse or sexual assault, that means I need to identify that for myself and do my own healing and go through my own process there. So it can be something that kind of sparks that journey for many other people and many of your, supporters or followers or friends or other people. Right?
And this contributing factor of finding other women who speak out against this, that cumulative understanding, strangely, can also lead to, not just this way, but one of the ways it could lead to justice. Once a lot of people come out about the same person, we now have leverage, not always, but many times, against one perpetrator that we go, wow, you've done this to so many women. And now these many cases, how is this? This is an undeniable proof that sometimes if we all withhold our stories and we all have the story about the same person, then it's going to be harder for one person to come out because they're the only story. And they might, again, elicit those fears of who will believe me. Mm-hmm. It was so long ago. The details are even fuzzy because I psychologically had to repress them to survive. So speaking out, one of the benefits is that if we all speak out, or if even you speak out, you might be the leveraging point for justice, for getting this person to serve the time that they deserve.
Mm-hmm. And ultimately, that is what's so important, is that these are necessary, right, to basically either take down a perpetrator or to kind of instill this foundational decision to create change in an organization or in an industry, right? So even if it doesn't per se, to put so-and-so in jail or get so-and-so fired, right? What you are doing is opening this conversation to now an entire industry going, all right, we need to really look at this and figure out how are we contributing to this as an industry? What kinds of changes can we make at the ground level to make sure this doesn't happen? So you are a catalyst for change for an entire potentially industry or a company or a subset of society. It's an important part of all of this.
So we've told you why it's hard to speak out. Mm-hmm. We've even told you some of the reasons as to why these, barriers might have a hard time to break. And we even said, okay, here's some of the benefits of speaking out. Now you're probably thinking, all right, guys, I get it, but how do I even do that? And you might be sitting at home with the mental difficulty of even wrapping your brain around where to begin. We get it, and we got you.
Yes.
So step number one, if you are in the midst of abuse, have had abuse before, or are in and out of the abusive situation, whether that be physical, mental, emotional, sexual, it's important that you understand that you should try to document everything. I like the idea of writing things down. Email also helps you timestamp. Look, I promise you, I wrote this at 5:42 on that day, because it's timestamped in emails. There's proof there. Screenshots of any sexual inappropriate texts or behaviors. There recently was a story of the comedy world where a lot of the comedians were taking advantage of, what we call dropping into people's DMs, inappropriate age gaps and whatnot. And luckily these women screenshotted what had happened. And it's an undeniable thing when a phone number and a timestamp is there in alignment, there's proof. So screenshots or audio and video recordings, if something is happening to you and you want to be believed about this, our ability to use our devices in our favor have never been so great. whether it's an audio recording, a video recording, WhatsApping, FaceTiming a friend and doing screen recordings of what's happening, just to have this in your, I'll call it evidence bag. It's highly beneficial either down the road or in an immediate situation.
Yeah, and as I was gonna say, even down the road, even if it's not something that you feel like right now you feel like you have the tools or the resources to speak up now, having those and just saying, you know what, if at any point I feel like I need to say something about this, because your gut is telling you the truth. Your gut might be telling you, you know what, this doesn't feel right, but I'm not sure. And so if you can document those things, it will just kind of support the process later if you can. Now, that's not to say if you have zero documentation that you shouldn't speak out. This is just another kind of giving some supportive options to people who say, okay, I'm going to come forward with this. I want to do it in the most impactful way that I possibly can.
I want to actually give a story real quick of a good friend of mine who, when something happened to her, she had wrote about it in her diary a long time ago. I'm talking 10 plus years ago. And she'd wrote it in her diary and documented a lot of what it felt like, how it was going. And then she was a teenager. She had put the diary away, but her mom had actually kept this diary, and I hope to interview her soon, so hopefully we could talk about this on a future live. But her mom actually kept the diary so that when her case came for proof, this came up as evidence, and it was undeniable because it was like 10 years plus old, and it was dated, and they saw it, and it was a beautiful source of just like, I just happen to have this thing where the expressions were honest and true, and it was incredible. What she didn't even recognize would be like a form of evidence towards justice, that it really came out that way. And I hope that we could share her story again later.
I hope so too. And then the next step would be you have to decide on how you want to speak out. So this will look different from everyone. And we're kind of right now talking about the people who are publicly speaking out because it's usually the one that comes to, into our informational feed.
Yes.
We'll say, but that is one form of speaking out, is through whatever kind of social media or public access to the public that you have. But there are many other forms of doing this, and it could mean speaking out or speaking up to somebody in your organization, right? To HR, to a leader in your company, to a family member, to a colleague, to anyone who can kind of support you and kind of figure out what the next step is. So speaking out doesn't have to look the same for everyone. And just because you don't yell it on the top of a mountaintop doesn't mean that it's not still valuable and that it's not still speaking out. And there's so many ways to do this, and just to recognize what's the way that you feel most comfortable, what's the way that you feel like will be the most impactful both for you in your healing, but also for whatever it is the desired outcome is that you have for speaking out.
Now, this is really important when she's talking about speaking out. One of the biggest suggestions that we offer in your journey to speaking out, and again, you could do it in an order that feels good for you, but one of the most important things that we want you to consider is seeking support. This is not a lonely journey, and if you do it on your own, we know the daunting feeling that it could feel to have to either go against your perpetrator and or the justice system and or the public idea of what this should be. And when I say public, I could even mean your just circle of friends. When I say seeking support is one of the most important and pivotal aspects of speaking out about what happened to you, I cannot highlight this enough, because emotional, mental, and physical support, revalidating that this has actually happened. A lot of people start to talk about it and can become convinced by people around them that's not really a big deal, or that didn't really happen, and it can really throw you off from what you're sharing, because you start to listen to someone and say, okay, maybe it wasn't as bad of an attack as I thought. So when you seek support, it's someone that will validate that your experience was not only true, but yours. It happened, okay? It happened for you. And that doesn't mean that they will know every detail or, put him completely like, yeah, he did all those things to you, but yes, you experienced that. And that is really important to have that support, and that can be family, friends, or hired therapists.
Yeah, and specifically mental support, mental health support, right? So a therapist, but also legal support. You may, before you decide to speak out, look into what types of legal support options you have to say, hey, what are my options here, and what way can I go about this? And having that guidance before you step into that can give you kind of the backing you need to move forward and get your team behind you. And there will be a team there ready to support you. You just kind of have to find who those people are. And then the next, what we'll say is that, and that's kind of like before you embark on speaking out, but after you speak out, it's important to set boundaries for yourself.
I'm sorry, what?
Boundaries. That's our favorite word. But when someone speaks out, a few things will happen, especially when it's done publicly. Naturally, you will have an influx of
two different types of people.
Yeah,
let's be honest.
Correct. So we've already addressed there's going to be a huge amount of backlash from people who may question you, may try to blame you, may all of these a slew of things that can be potentially harmful for you, which is why we have the support, right? But there actually may be another group of people who feel very connected to you and actually want to share all of their stories with you as well and say, I experienced something similar, here's my story, or want to reach out or maybe ask you more details, or maybe, so there will be a lot of people with potentially very well-meaning people who are praising you, who are supporting you, who want to share their stories with you, but recognize that in this exact moment, you can decide, and it is okay for you to decide, that this is not necessarily about everyone else in this moment. This is about you and what you need to heal. So if you need to set boundaries with people, or just basically say, you know what, I'm going to take a break from social media today. And I've had to do that before too, where it's kind of like you drop a bomb and then you're like, I'm just going to walk away. And because I'm not ready to actually see everything that came from this yet. I have to make sure I'm in a supported place, that I have my team ready, that I'm in a good place to actually sit there and go through these. And maybe you never do. Maybe you actually never read a comment, or you never read your DMs, and you just go, you know what, I'm going to walk away from this and do my own form of healing, because it's about me right now, not necessarily about all these other people.
Yeah, you don't owe your resharing of again, and we've talked about it earlier in this chat, about how kind of sharing your story again and again and again and again can really rehash triggers and traumas that you have spent so many years trying to handle, deal with, suppress, process, deconstruct. And by sharing your story with either family members or friends, this may open up a channel where they go, me too, here's how. And now you're hearing their story on your story, and it might be too much for you. And we are giving you permission to say, wow, your story is so important. And it impacts me to a point where I think I'm getting re-triggered. I need to take some space to still deal with what I'm dealing with. But if I can't support you in this, I really suggest that you find support, but I appreciate you sharing this story with me. There's a beautiful way that you can gracefully say, you matter, that matters, I need to heal. And that's just that point of separation that she's saying, is to keep the boundary closed, or again, use that as sharing and healing. But that boundary is so important for you to flex that muscle as much as possible.
So that is basically addressing if you are an actual survivor and looking to speak out. But we have to now address a whole other subset of people who are equally important to this movement. And those are the bystanders, right? Those are those who have witnessed abuse, who have witnessed sexual assault or sexual harassment, who have witnessed it, and who have yet to speak out. Your voice is needed too. And matter of fact, it is equally as important, because especially with all the kind of things that go along, the weight that comes along with a survivor of trauma or abuse, to speak out, having somebody who witnessed that and who can validate that, it's simple validation. Your speaking out is equally as important. And so we recommend that if you are a bystander or somebody who has witnessed this and says, you know what, I want to speak out too, there's a couple things that you consider. Basically the same thing that we talked about with the survivors, which is document everything, right? Decide on how and whom. Seek the support you might need, meaning maybe you want to consult legal counsel before you address it, or find out. But also make sure that you do it and you keep confidentiality, right? So you either can keep confidentiality with the survivor, with the victim of the situation, or you speak to them directly and you make sure you get consent from them to share any types of stories or anything that you witness. So that's another important part of this, is protecting those who need to be protected in these serious situations, and making sure you get their consent to share their experiences and their stories.
Let me just add in here, because we sometimes do this beautiful thing called assuming. We're going to assume that if you did witness it, that you intervened if you could have. So that was not said, because when we say you were a witness or a bystander to such a situation, and you could, again, be recording or be watching, we want to always assume that if you can intervene to protect a person, you will. So that was just an assumption that we place, which is probably an unfair thing to do.
Well, yeah, and I think actually going off of that, this is actually a reason why some people don't, because they didn't intervene. And you might actually have concern about that and say, I didn't do anything at the time when I witnessed this. So we actually want to let you know that it is, there are other reasons and pressures as to why people don't do that in the moment. The same reason why the potential survivors don't say something or do something in the moment.
Too much time has passed,
and or you're just like in shock and you don't really know what to do, and you're witnessing this. So part of that, which will be another talk that we have, is how do we empower people to step in and to intervene during these situations, and what tools can they use when doing this, right? But if you did not intervene at the moment, you still have an opportunity to say something and to speak out, and it's still needed, right? It's still needed, and it's not. We can't let the fact that we didn't do anything and say anything scare us from saying, you know what, enough is enough. I have to speak on this because I know something about this, and I need to share my truth of what I witnessed, and that is also equally as important. So
I agree with that, and it's important to also know, if you weren't a bystander, if you didn't witness it, if you don't know what really went down, let's call it, you weren't the fly on the wall, and someone is coming to you, divulging to you their beautiful experience of vulnerability with you, then our request and suggestion as a bystander in the situation is to take them so seriously. And it's probably the difference between whether they will continue to share their story and speak out and not. If you take them seriously and go, wow, this is a big deal, please tell me more, and allow them to really be vulnerable and open themselves up to you, it is likely that they will dig them into themselves and not only tell you more and confide more in you, but even reveal more to themselves of what had happened and how it went down. And that is such an important and pivotal position you can have in someone's speaking out journey. The ability to hold open a non-judgmental and taking them seriously space. We struggled a little bit between believing them and taking them seriously. And the beauty of this is, believing them is even actually unnecessary at this point, because we weren't there or not there, but you do need to take it seriously and go, wow, I want to hear more. Regardless of whether I want to believe the situation, if I know that guy and I doubt that he would do something like that, irrelevant. We take it seriously, we listen to what they're saying, and we give them the opportunity to fully divulge their truth. That is pivotal.
It is. And so taking them seriously is it's part of how we can support others who are speaking out. And that's ultimately what can I do? How can I help in these types of situations? Maybe, again, you weren't a bystander, or you didn't actually speak you aren't the one speaking out personally, but how can you support this movement, this idea of people speaking out against violence or against abusers or against sexual assault? And this is the way, right? Taking it seriously. And there are also some things to avoid, right? We already talked about avoid the tendency to victim blame, right? Or invalidating an experience, or continuously asking them to retell a story, or to try to find out details just because you feel like knowing them. Or here's another one, is that it's very easy to disbelieve something based on your personal interactions. So a lot of times, something will come out, usually about a very well-known figure and potentially well-liked, and then all these other people, not all, but some there might be some other either women or other people who worked with them and go, well, I just want to say that I never had a situation like that happen, so that must be an indicator of their of basically their personality and their values. And what we have to recognize is, just because we didn't have a specific type of interaction with somebody does not mean it doesn't mean that it's not possible for somebody else to have a different interaction with that person.
Yeah, your assumption and beautiful experience and knowing of someone's character does not necessarily go into someone else's lane and their knowing of their character. The same way, couples, we don't always know what happens behind closed doors, and fairly so, that's their private information. Everybody can have a different lane with different people, and it brings, different people bring different things out of people. So you might go, wow, my boss would never speak to me that way. I can't even imagine him doing that to you. But you have no idea what people are capable with other people. So invalidating their interaction with someone because you had a different experience is somewhat unfair.
Right, especially because we know that with these perpetrators, they often target kind of like people who they might perceive to be more vulnerable. So, for example, as Henner's wife will say in Gracie University, right? I recognize that our employees, our students, other people may treat me differently than they treat other people. And I am fully aware of that. So I might go, wow, I really like so-and-so. They've always been super nice to me. I can recognize that somebody may not have the same experience that I do with somebody as another student, or somebody who another employee who's working here. So we just have to be aware of that and not to jump to too many conclusions. It doesn't mean that we can't be extremely hurt by it and have feel like we got punched in the gut when we find out somebody that we like and that we know is there's an accusation against this, like some sort of heinous either crime or sexual misconduct. That's hard for us to take in, and that's okay too.
One of the ways that I think I like to talk about assuming the best or the worst in people. And I'm going to go extreme for a second, and then we'll take it back to something not as extreme. But it's kind of like a bomb analogy. If there is a building, and someone's like, yo, there's a bomb in that building, you're going to be like, no, I've been in this building many times. Let's just go in. It's no big deal. Are you going to treat the building as if it's a dangerous location first and be like, wait, that's something I should consider, and approach it with care, even though you've been in that building many times and you felt it was safe many times before? But the new information proves somebody thinks there's a bomb in there. So you'll go, wow, let's investigate this further to really divulge whether this is a safe place or not anymore. Similarly, you can do like with a coach. A coach is now being told, wow, this coach was inappropriate with one of the players on the team. You can go, not my coach. My coach is so amazing. I know him so well. He's been our coach for 7 years. It's impossible. This is a safe place or a person for so long. Presented with new information that this coach may have been inappropriate with one of the students should cause you to hesitate for a second and go, I never thought this person could do something like that, but I'm willing to look into this behavior a little more deeply. And would you want to know? Would you want to know if the coach who's coaching maybe your child has these allegations against them? Or do you want to keep it in the boys' club where like, hey, don't talk, don't tell? Yeah. That's what we're looking at when it comes to a bystander. If you know this information, it's really important that for the safety of future people, you find within yourself a way for this information to get to public knowledge of other people who are interacting with this person. Yeah. Again, even if it's not you speaking out, finding a way to get it.
And this goes back to this idea of, people will say, well, people are innocent until proven guilty. And that is an important thing to uphold in the justice system, and that does protect many people who are normally not protected. The challenge with this and why these kind of analogies are important is that, again, not that it's up to us to decide who's guilty or who's not, right? But what we have to recognize is two things. One is that the people who are normally protected in these types of situations are often the perpetrators.
Yep.
So we have an obligation to then try to protect those who are the survivors, the targets, or the victims of these crimes. We have an obligation to support them through this, and to recognize that they may not receive that support. And two, it goes back to exactly what Victoria said, which is there's the court, there's the courts, but then there's the court of public opinion. And it is important for us to question that and to take it seriously and to recognize that, we owe it to the society and everyone around this person to find out if these allegations are potentially true. And that is essentially making the world safer, making everyone around them safer if we take these seriously.
I want to comment on this, though, in terms of like a social media world to people's jobs. There's a lot of people that once one allegation comes out, I don't know if it's a joke because I don't think it's that funny, but this guy was like, oh great, now all of our jobs are in danger the minute one woman speaks out against us. And I tilt my head and go, wow, like, it's really important that we recognize that is one of the suffocating ways that we keep women from speaking out by saying like, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose my job, I'm going to do these things. Wait, like if you truly are innocent in this situation, then allow due process with everyone and say, no, I'm willing to communicate about this. That never happened the way you said it, lady. Let's talk about this. I'll go on public forum. I'll go to court. There's a fight on both sides that needs to be discussed if a woman is willing, again, to expose herself so vulnerably on a public setting or to possibly challenge a hierarchy and power norm to state her truth, she deserves an ear. And when this public idea of men saying, "Oh, careful, they're all coming for us. The witches are coming," like, first of all, yeah, we're mad. This has been happening to so many of us for years. But on the other side, it's like, bro, if you have nothing to worry about, then you have nothing to worry about. Then you should be right by our side saying, who are these guys who are ruining it for me too? Who are these guys who are hurting these women and risking all of our jobs with these threats because, you're going to get fired and we're going to have to figure this out. This doesn't make any sense. So...
And these are likely the ones who maybe aren't, potentially they could be, but maybe they're not, let's just say, engaging in this like overt, sexual misconduct, right? But they are likely the ones who are engaging in this sort of normalization of things that are inappropriate. And then when they just go, well, I don't know what the line is, I don't know, it's then you go, okay, so you are part of this. And guess what? You need to get called out on what's inappropriate and what's not.
Yes, or call yourself out. Man, I was doing this in the workplace and I didn't recognize. Actually, I'm curious. Is this inappropriate behavior? I'd rather see on the Twitter feeds, on the Instagram feeds, questions. Hey guys, I thought that, the subtle touching of someone's shoulder was a way to engage in communication that brought us both comfort so that she knew that I'm a safe person. I would say, oh my gosh, thank you so much for asking. Some women really don't like to be touched, and here's why. And then we can have a beautiful conversation. So if you lead with curiosity to know, hey, I have been taught that being a polite gentleman means X, Y, and Z, that engaging in the workplace felt good because I want to bond and have a social community in these ways. Can you help me tell me if this is actually appropriate or inappropriate? You can even ask the women in your workplace or in your friend group, hey guys, I've been saying these jokes about the sexual thing, and you guys all laugh, but I'm starting to wonder, based on everything that's coming out, are these appropriate? And if these people really care about you, they will serve you a nice plate of honesty with grace and forgiveness. You will be forgiven because you led with curiosity with the intent to better the human that you are. We don't want to bash you all. We don't want to fire all the men in the world. We actually love men. We love them so much. We raise them. We birth men. So please understand that when we want you to speak out, we want you to stand with us, not against us. We're not trying to attack you. We're not trying to break down all the men in the world. Patriarchy is not about going against men. It's about going against men who oppress females and abuse their power in positions against our sovereign ability to want to, again, just be loved, secure, and safe. Please know that if you can stand with us in this, we can fight a fight that is been happening for, I want to say eons, but I've not been around to actually know that factual situation. I really think that for us, if we stay in the present moment and see what we're dealing with, we can raise better young gentlemen, and we can understand the shifts in nature that need to be made with the men that stand by our side.
Yes, and we can't wait to actually talk to some of those men in one of our next talks.
Coming up soon.
To see how they want to contribute and can contribute to this. So, ultimately what we want to kind of end on this topic is we, again, have addressed the challenges and the barriers. We've addressed the foundation of what is upholding these barriers to people feeling like they can speak out. We have addressed how, the benefits of speaking out and the beauty of it and the brave men and women who are doing that.
Yes.
We've addressed how to speak out in a way that may feel safe for you in the safest way possible. And we've addressed how to support the speaking out movement, where us watching it as either bystanders or watching it as viewers, how can we contribute to support our friends and our community who are speaking out against this? And we also wanted to offer some resources, right? Some resources for those who do feel like they might be ready to speak. And this might be somebody who said, I did not think I was ready, or I may not be ready yet, but I want to get ready. And two resources we want to offer you. One is rain.org, RAINN.org is a really important organization who is, at the front end of offering, support and for anyone experiencing sexual abuse or sexual assault. And they are a great resource and a great tool. The other is the Victim Rights Law Center. So that's victimrights.org. And they offer legal services. They offer some pro bono legal services to survivors and to victims of sexual abuse and sexual assault. And so if you need some guidance in terms of how to proceed, those are great resources to both share with others, and also for you to look into or donate to and support.
And this might be a spoiler alert, and maybe it'll happen down the line. We're looking into ways that we can also offer our private support sessions with you guys. Now that we have virtual channels, it will be coming in soon, so stay tuned on that. But we will give you some details in the future. And the last thing that when it comes to supporting as a bystander, people speaking out against this is the perpetual checking in. This process, this journey for any person who has been violated, abused, or taken advantage of in any way is not a one and done healing process. We don't just, act through a few sessions of therapy and peace out. A lot of this trauma exists for the rest of their life. And that doesn't mean you're hooked on the side of them to check in every year for the rest of their life. But if you do have a relationship with this person and you do care, one of the best ways you can support and help them is rechecking in intermittently and really asking how they're doing, holding the space, or asking if they're getting the resources they need, providing maybe more insight or lending an ear. And sometimes the best way is just saying, how can I support you in this part of the journey? And every part of the journey offers a different mountain and valley of struggles or challenges or revelations. And if you can be there to kind of check in with them, support them, encourage them, there is a beautiful foundation and base that you could help them, again, grow their bed of resilience and normalcy again, which is, I think, what so many survivors are just looking to do and build again.
Mm-hmm. So I think we are all a part of this. It doesn't matter what your past is. It doesn't matter what your experience with these types of incidents are. We can all support, whether it's ourselves speaking out, which we ask you to continue to do that bravely, and we commend you. Yep, and we commend those who are. And again, speaking out in whatever way feels comfortable for you. Speaking out as a bystander, if you witness something, or if you can support somebody in their journey to speaking out, then do that. And if not, then just supporting these movements and offering your reaffirmations of and the validation of their experiences and showing support, because for every backlash that they receive, we want to make sure that they receive 3 positive words of encouragement for them to continue the work that they're doing.
Yes. And this conversation can be very difficult for some to hear because it is possibly making them look within themselves. What was their contributing participation to the situation? Were they the perpetrator? Let's hope not. But if you are listening, let's hope you speak out about yourself. Mm-hmm. Or are you the person who was a bystander who contributed to, an environment that breeds this? These are sometimes what I call the boys club idea, where that this guy is saying inappropriate commentary. And if he's saying that in front of you, he's probably doing 10 times worse behind your back. So are you a bystander who is a witness who is not stopping inappropriate verbiage, behaviors that could lead to more? Or are you a bystander who does not, who intervenes, but is not seeing something but wants to get involved? Or are you someone who was very close to getting into these behaviors or have been actually attacked or boundary crossed yourself? Wherever you lie on the spectrum, we have to understand that speaking out, can be a different thing for each of you. And this conversation can land as a beautiful awakening for many, or like a struggling, like, oh, this is so uncomfortable. Why do we keep having to talk about this? Mm-hmm. And I implore that you ask yourself, why, if you are uncomfortable, why am I uncomfortable with these revelations and this commentary? And that hopefully can help you bring some insight. And again, we're open to have these conversations. We hope that you will drop a comment below, ask some questions, lead with curiosity, and we are happy to answer a lot of these questions in future lives or just in an Instagram chat page that we do. We put a lot of information on our Instagram page at Women Empowered GJJ. And if you want to join in any of these conversations, we absolutely welcome all of your experiences, all of your insight. If you have supported someone, what worked for you? What didn't? Leave us a comment. Let us know. Subscribe to our page, because it's really important that we get to keep giving this information to you guys. And we are honestly grateful to keep sharing the space, that you keep returning, and that you give us your time and your ear. And we hope that we can continue these discussions weekly.
Thank you for joining us, and we will see you next week.
Ciao.